Welcome everyone to this week's Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework bi-weekly sync. My name is Garry Trinder. I will be your host for today, and on today's session, we're going to have the latest update on the SharePoint framework. We're going to have the latest updates on all the community projects as well. We'll all then get on camera and have our picture time session in together mode. And then we have the real stars for today. We have 3 demos for you. We have Kasper Bo Larsen, who's going to be telling us all about SharePoint Search updates and how to keep an eye on those. We have Harminder Singh, who is going to show us how to build a service health solution for Microsoft 365 with SharePoint Framework. And then we have Stefan Bauer, who is going to give us an introduction to the hTWOo UI framework, a better Fluent UI framework. So there we are. It's a bold statement. So how can you get involved in the community? Well, there's lots of different ways of getting involved. There's lots of content as well that's produced by the community. The Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community videos, so every recording of this session and all of the demos are put on the community channel. We have a LinkedIn group for discussions. So if you're on LinkedIn and you're not part of this group, just pop along, join as a member. You'll find lots of articles that are being shared, but also people starting discussions as well. So get involved, get participating, get answering questions, and if you have friends who are not part of that group, tell them about it as well. We have tons of open source initiatives as well. We have PnP repo, we have the Office Dev repo, we have the SharePoint repo, and the Microsoft Graph repos as well. So if you're looking about getting involved as a contributor, that's a great place to start. And if you're looking for some samples as well, so things that people have already built in the community and they've shared it with the rest of the world, so that you can find out how to also build cool things like them, and even use it as the start of your own projects, then we have the unified sample gallery, where you'll find all sorts of samples: SharePoint Framework, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Lists, you name it, you'll find it there. And if you can't remember any of the links, the best place to go to is to the landing page of the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community, which is aka.ms/community/home. You'll basically be able to access all of the resources that is available for you through the community. We have a number of calls that take place as well, not just this call, but we have other calls taking place. We have the weekly Microsoft 365 and Power Platform call, which has just Microsoft speakers. So that is every Tuesday. And then we have regular bi-weekly community calls for Power Platform, Microsoft Identity, Office add-ins, as well as this call that you're on today. If you want to get all the details for these calls, to be able to join them, add them to your calendars, then go to aka.ms/community/calls, and you'll be able to find all the invites there and all of the links to join the calls as well. So next Tuesday, we do have the regular weekly call. So we've got 3 sessions for you coming up. We have Stuart McCarthy and Marcus Castro, who are going to tell us about why we would build power solutions in Teams. You'll have myself, Garry Trinder. I'm going to be talking about how to bring your existing projects to Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. And we have Ahmad Mossafar, who is going to basically demonstrate a project that won the Microsoft Graph hackathon that was recently run. So it's a magic note app to plan the day efficiently with AI and MS Graph, which sounds absolutely fantastic. If you would like to come on this call and you would like to present, then by all means, get in touch, and the easiest way to do that is through the link at aka.ms/community/request/demo. Fill out the form, and we will make sure that we can get you on the call for you to present and share your knowledge with the rest of the community. So David's not on the call today, but if he was here, he'd be telling you about how the PnP community helps you get started as well. So there are several sessions that are available for you to get started as a first-time contributor. We have sessions for writing for the web, getting set up with SharePoint Framework, how to use the samples, how to use the VS Code for not just code. First-time presenter sessions, and also the Microsoft 365 model practitioners sessions are all on there. If you go to aka.ms/sharing-is-caring, you'll get all the full details, and they are looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in helping other people get into the community, then definitely reach out, and I'm sure David will be happy to talk to you about that. Speaking of which, of the community, we want to recognise all the good work that everyone is doing as well. So there are several badges that are available to you as a community contributor. These are the same badges that you would get for passing like Microsoft accreditations. It's powered by Credly, and we're always adding more. So if you are looking for recognition for your contributions, then we love to give that recognition as well. So if you want to find out more details, go to aka.ms/community/recognition. Vesa, do you want to take this slide?
Yes, so quickly, being cautious about the time again. So Microsoft 365 conference happening in May 2nd to May 4th. We have an awesome setup there. We have multiple keynotes and a great set of announcements actually coming up on that conference as well. So it should be really, really interesting. If you have an opportunity, hopefully we can meet you there. Let's go to the following slide. I think Bob is going to quickly recap this one.
Yes, hi. I was visiting my grandma in the countryside, and she said that all her Azure applications could use a lot more usage and a lot more collaboration. So I invited her to this great webcast, which is a week from today, which is Microsoft Teams App Camp. Extend your Azure solution to Microsoft Teams. So it's all about Azure and Teams development and actually how to extend your existing Azure investments in to become Microsoft Teams apps. And so please join us. Teams App Camp, aka.ms/Teams App Camp is the registration. I'll be joined by Robbie Williams, and we'll have a surprise guest of Garry Trinder. So back to you.
Who's that? It'd be great to join you. Sounds like a great session. Okay, moving on. SharePoint Framework updates. Vesa, cool. Back to you.
So the latest version, which is available, is 1.17.1. That is kind of a small patch release. We found a small thing which is not actually critical in 1.17, but we wanted to address that immediately. And you might actually see similar kind of updates in the future as well. Let's go to the following slide. The growth curve of SharePoint Framework is awesome. It keeps on just growing all the time. So we can see an adoption across the Microsoft 365, which is awesome. Now let's go to the following slide. 1.7.1 it's the current version, which is the GA for production. 1.17 is fine as well. 1.7.1 has a bit more adjustments. And this is really targeting Microsoft Viva extensibility and SPFx within the team. So we're aligned on that storyline with the SPFx applications. Then you can easily extend them to office.com and for Outlook if you want to do so. Next, we'll get some details around both framework powered with Viva Connection cards, which is going to be in public preview pretty soon. And then 1.18 will come to preview. That's it from my side. From engineering side, let's move to the open source projects.
Let's talk about the open source projects and moving on to PnPjs. Julie.
Yes, so we did the release for version 3.14 on Monday the 17th. We had to move it because I was on vacation. Anyway, we had a bug fix for some missing quotes in that recycle bin get by ID method, so that got fixed up. We did a big new add for a Azure Identity JavaScript client package. So that is a new package in our packages library for PnPjs that allows support for Azure Identity. Most useful for Node.js project development projects, but it does support a lot of different things. So if you're wanting to get started using managed identity in your Azure functions or some of the other Azure properties, then you definitely want to check that out. We updated taxonomy documentation. We have updated our graph default and SP default node behaviors to deprecate the MSAL parameter, and this is in relation to that Azure Identity Client thing, and so that is deprecated. Check that out, and fixed and added the tenant app catalog property to the the root SP object, and got the web app catalog working correctly. So those all fixes happened. Definitely check out that V3 nightly builds for any PRs that are merged in between monthly releases. You can see those things there and test them out ahead of time. And always remember to follow us, M365 PnPjs on Twitter. Back to you, Garry.
Thank you, Julie. And CLI for Microsoft 365. So we've had a new release. We have the version 6.6 release. This is an interim release. Because of the release of SharePoint Framework 1.17.1, so we've released this version so that you can go and upgrade your projects to that latest version. You don't have to get the beta version for that. We've also updated our project doctor and SPFx doctor commands as well, just to kind of do diagnostic checks on your environment as well, just to make sure you've got everything in place to build on the new SharePoint Framework version. We've got a new command for Power Platform, so that's the ability to update your tenant settings, and something we're really excited about. So we have added AI chat-powered search to our documentation. So this means that you can use natural language to explore the documentation. You can ask it questions like, how do I upgrade my SharePoint Framework and project? And you'll get a natural response, and you can keep having a conversation with the chat as well. Really excited about that. We'd like to thank folks from Mendable who have worked with us to get that in place. So please check it out and let us know how it works. If you want to get hold of the new version, then you can get that from npm using the @latest tag. And if you want to use Docker, again, we've got the latest tag on there. If you want to get involved in our community, best place is to join our Discord server. So again, really excited about all the activity that we've seen on the server. And if you wanted to know more and ask the community about how you can use the CLI, then that's a great place to start, as well as following us on Twitter as well @CLI Microsoft 365 for all the latest updates. Okay, moving on. So we have Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy. Last month was early in the month, we released 0.6. We don't have any updates really to give you, apart from the next version is due for release, but next week actually. We've got a few things that we're going to be looking at. So being able to run the tool in CI/CD, graph batching guidance, support for expiring tokens, and just some general improvements as well. If you haven't used the proxy, then go along, check it out. Go to aka.ms/graph/proxy/download, and you'll be able to download the tool, go through our getting started tutorials as well, and basically start testing your applications and make sure that they are resilient for when cloud APIs either fail or have behaviors such as throttling, which is obviously difficult to recreate on your own machine. Moving on, I think we have Alex here for the reusable SPFx controls.
Yes, thank you, Garry. So yesterday we released 3.14.0 for React controls and 3.13.0 for React property controls. Both libraries now support SPFx 1.17.1, and they also have some enhancement and various fixes for different types of components. Thank you for all our contributors who made these releases available. You can check more information about the libraries on GitHub and also on the Twitter. Thank you. Back to you, Garry.
Thank you, Alex. Vesa, update on the toolkit for Viva
Yes,
Connections?
on the Viva Connection Toolkit, we do have the latest version, which went actually live earlier today, updated to use SharePoint Framework 1.17.1 and CLI for Microsoft 365 at 6.6 behind of the scenes. So basically, this is an abstraction wrapper on top of those out of the box in production SharePoint Framework human generator, and then the awesome CLI for Microsoft 365. We also do have a new maintainer in the team, who's Adam Wojciech, who's going to help on improving these things, and we do welcome contributions. Absolutely. That's it from that side.
Fantastic. Quick update on PnP Modern Search. So there's lots of questions on GitHub, and the usage is growing. There is the 4.8 version. So lots of contributors getting involved and adding new features, but more contributors are wanted. So if you're a developer looking to get involved in open source, then definitely this is a project that is screaming out for new people to help. So go along there and start contributing. Quickly, PnP SPFx samples. So fortunately, there are no new samples to talk about. However, if you do have something that you are building and you think this would make a great sample, I want to share this with other people, then definitely think about contributing your sample, and then you can get recognized on this call as well. So if you go to aka.ms/m365/samples, you'll be able to see all of the samples that are available, but also find out how to actually submit your samples as well. And with that, we are now at picture time.
Excellent. Garry, I have to call out on the SPFx samples. There were a lot of contributions, but they're pending for final processing because the team has been incredibly busy with MFA Summit and all of the other conferences. But that's on us. We're trying to get jump on them pretty soon. Now, let's get in here. Let's do the crew photo. Hopefully, the pixelation gets better. I will double check my network, which should be okay. Not that. The pixelation looks really, really, really bad. Give me 1 second. I will stop my camera. If that helps, I will pop away from the picture. And it doesn't help. Now, from a timing perspective, it's okay. We can see everybody to wave their hands. I will put the 1, 2, 3 running, and we'll grab a GIF animation out of that. No can do. It's pretty pixelated today. Thanks everybody for joining. Awesome to have you in a call, and hopefully we can see you in the in-person conferences later this month. Okay, Garry already took it away. Okay, cool.
Sorry, kind of pick time up. So on to the main part of today, our superstars, our 3 superstars. First, we have Kasper Bo Larsen, and he's going to tell us about SharePoint Search updates. Kasper.
Indeed, I will.
To you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about today is about the very famous Canary and the coal mine. Or the subtitle is How to Keep an Eye on Your SharePoint Search Updates. Because as some of you might know, we don't really have an SLA for any updates to the search index. And a lot of us are creating a lot of solutions which are based on search. And we can't really see anything in the M365 health dashboard about how well the search index is actually performing. So that's what we're going to discuss today. My name is Kasper Larsen, and you can contact me on Twitter using that handle, and you can find me on GitHub as well. And I'm primarily working on the PnP Modern Search and the PnP script samples repositories. And I'm from Denmark, and I work in Fellowmind, Denmark. So the reason for this initial version is that I had some outages on search, and you can't really see that anywhere. So I had to figure out how to make a early warning system. And this is exactly what I've done here. I just use brute force. So what I do is that I have my SharePoint list, always use SharePoint. That's where I grew up. And the only thing I have is basically a single list item where I update the value. But the only thing I do is basically I have my list item and I update that. And then I have an Azure function, which will trigger, as you just saw there, it triggers every 5 minutes. That's the interval I've decided on in this case. So every 5 minutes, I check that the value I have here matches the one that I have in the search index. If it does, then I'll just update this one. It's just basically a date time ticks. So I'll update that on. If it doesn't match yet, which I don't expect within 5 minutes, that would be exceptional. If it doesn't match, I'll just try again later. And once I do this, I just put that into my logging list. So every 5 minutes, I update this list saying whether if I found the same identical values or not. So it's a pretty simple warning system. And if it exceeds some threshold, it could be like 30 minutes for the item to be picked up and put into the search index, I can issue a warning or put on a red light in my intranet or whatever I want. But now at least I know that the solutions that I have built working on search might have an issue, and I can warn my users that they might not rely that much on what they see right now, but I hope it will be better later on. And I can also raise a service request for Microsoft support, just to let them know that we have an outage right now, a sort of like an outage, because we don't have an SLA, so at least we have a bad performance right now on the search index. And that might raise awareness so that they might be able to allocate some more resources for it, because the search index is sort of like a priority based. So if somebody on the farm are doing a lot of heavy duty work, you might get throttled, basically meaning that the search index doesn't update that often. The problem is that the farm concept in Office 365 is basically a number of tenants. We don't even know how many tenants are in a farm. It could be thousands. So we don't know who's actually the culprit here, who's actually doing a lot of heavy duty work and slowing us down. So basically, we just have to learn to live with it. So that's why this early warning system might be a good idea. Just put all of this into my repository, which is of course available for download, and you can use it as you please. But as you see, I'm just using basically my SharePoint any SharePoint site, a list for the target of my comparison, where I use search and I get the list item, and then I just logging into any kind of logging list. And this one's, as I said, in Azure function. Some people might be concerned about the cost of this Azure function. It's hitting this. It's triggered every 5 minutes, so it must be pretty expensive, people might guess. As far as I could tell, and I've been running this for more than half a year now, it cost me about $2 each month. And I would like to spend $2 in order to sleep well and know that if something happens, then I know it first, and before my end users are starting to call me early in the morning. So that's for me, that is important. But all I do is basically down here, I just get my list item, looking at the tick value. I request the same item again using search, compare those two values, and if they're identical, everything is fine. I'll just reset. If it's not fine, I'll log it into to the logging list. And if it exceeds some kind of threshold, I can do something. Something in this case is just that I send an email to myself. But that is completely up to you, and I'll make sure that the link to this repository is in the show notes, sort of. I think that was all for my presentation, so have fun with it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that, Kasper. Short and sweet, but fantastic. See the reaction in the chat. There's a lot of people excited about what you've just shared. So thank you very much for coming on and talking about that today. Okay, so let's move on to our next presenter. Harminder Singh is going to tell us about building service health solution for Microsoft 365 with SharePoint Framework. Harminder.
Thanks, Gary. Today, I'm going to show you the SPFx web pod, which I created with the help of Graph API. And the idea I got when we had an outage a couple of months back, and that was a major outage and nobody was having any clue what's happening. So in case if someone is admin, they could go to the service health and they could check what's happening, because service health provides us the current status and all the issue logs as well. So I got that idea. I thought let's make that work for everyone with the help of Graph API, and I did it. Before I move on, myself, Harminder Singh, I'm M365 solution developer. I'm working with Nagarro in India, and I live in city beautiful Chandigarh. These are my handles where anyone can contact with me, and I'll be happy to connect and share my knowledge, and will receive my other feedbacks also. So moving to demo, if we want to see the service health of any of the Microsoft 365 service, then we have to go to the admin center, and in the health section we have the service health option available, where we see the current health status of all the services we have in Microsoft 365. And as of now, what we see is Exchange Online is having 3 advisory, and Microsoft 365 Defender is having 1 advisory. So similar way, in case if someone wants to see all these status, then I created this web part which looks similar to the service health we have in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So look and feel wise and the functionality wise, I try to replicate everything. Similar to the Microsoft Admin Center, if I click on this 3 advisories, it shows the tabular structure with all the advisories we have with the issue title and the issue type. So if I click over here, it will show the same table. And in case if I click on any of the item, it will show the status with all the updates, similar to the one we have in the Microsoft 365. And in case if we have only 1 advisory or 1 issue, then it will directly go to the detail section, and it will not show the table, which is similar again to the one we have in the Microsoft 365. So to make it work, I'll move to the code part. To make it work, what I have used is the resource Microsoft Graph, and the scope which I set is to service health read.all. And from the web part perspective, and this is the entry point for the web part, where I have used very minimal properties. So I just have the title which sets the web part title, and on top of that, what I do is I create a graph service which is a kind of reusable service. And my normal practice is that I create all these services in a common folder outside the web parts. So in case in future I need to add any new web part which will be using the same graph service, I will be referring this service from the common folder which is in the services. So whatever services which I think is common across all the web parts, I put that in a common folder over here. And I initialize that service in this onInit method and pass that instance to my main element, React element, which is M365 service health in the form of property. So it receives the title property, the context of the web part, and the graph service which I initialized over here. If I quickly move to the graph service, it simply has 2 methods. One is a private, which helps us in getting the client, the graph client, and the other one is the endpoint, which provides us the health overviews, which also has the issues detail expanded. So that is all from the service perspective. And if I move to the web part or the main element, then it has 2 sub elements which are again very simple. First simply shows the title, and other contains the actual logic. And if I move to the main element, I would say, or the component, I would say, then it has a very simple return method which either show the spinner when the form loads. So Graph API takes some time to provide the actual data. So I simply show the spinner, and then the detail list from the Fluent UI, which shows the title and the status of the services. And we have 2 panels over here. First is showing the tabular structure when we have more than one issues or advisory. So if we click on that, then it shows the table. And the other one is the detail thing which we get when we have only single advisory, or if we click any of the item in the table from the first panel. The idea to create the two panel was that in case if someone opens the table or the panel which is having the table, then they can go back by clicking on the back button. So it's better that we manage it in separately, so that I can show or hide one of the panel at one point. And all these components which I have designed, except this the main webpart.ts file, are based on the functional based React components. And in this react.use effect hook, I am calling the graph service get health overview function, which provides me the service health response. And based upon the response which I received, I create the list view items. And this list view helper service, again, this is a local service which I have created in this web part, and it gives me the code or the functionality to provide the count and show whether it is an advisory or incident, or if it is healthy, then it will simply show the healthy. So basically it will create the structure of the item, and then the detail list will show that item to me over here. And once we select any of the item from the detail list, if it is having more than one advisory or issue, then it shows this panel. And in this panel, I again have the table structure created, and it's again stateless component. It doesn't have any state. It simply returns the structure of the table. And the other component which I have is which shows the complete detail of the issue. That again is a stateless component. Now the good thing which I got is that this issue service returns the proper HTML for the detail issue logs. So I just need to iterate through all the posts, and those are again HTML, and I simply set it in the div element. So I don't need to design any of the CSS, or I don't need to provide any of the styling except these minor styles, which allows me to set the margin and white space area. So I think that was all. Before I close this one, I just want to show one more thing, that I try to break all this web part into multiple sub component, and for each of the component I try to create the stylings at the component level, so that I have a very manageable code, and in case if I see any issue, I simply need to go to that component and I can fix it. Back to you, Garry.
Fantastic, Harminder. That's great. Loved looking at your code, by the way. Nice and clean, and love the use of the stateless components there, as well as the dangerously set in a HTML property, which I've not seen for a while, but I've used myself in the past, definitely. But fantastic solution, great use case as well. So if you're actually a question, has this been put in the samples gallery? Is this available, or where people? Can people get to this?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen, then take a look at the samples gallery and take a look and have a look through the code yourself, and maybe even contribute to it as well. Make it, add to it, make it better than it already is. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on to our next speaker, and we have Stefan Bauer, who's going to tell us about hTWOo 2.0, a better Fluent UI framework. Stefan, over to you.
Thank you, Garry. Give me a second. I share my screen in a bit. So hTWOo, a better Fluent UI. This is some project that we already created 2 years ago, which was the goal to, back in the old days, we had the Office UI Fabric, which was just HTML and CSS. And so this was at some point deprecated. So we wanted to go back to this. And this was really the first draft of hTWOo was really a weekend project. So it was 2 days coding. And then I had most of the Fluent UI components done in HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. We need this in some cases. Another thing or another motivation for hTWOo was accessibility first. So I wanted to learn more about accessibility, and I built hTWOo directly with all the accessibility in there. So we are currently testing for the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.2, which is the recommended state for since last year. And AA means the quality standard that we have there. So we're in the middle. There's just one higher, which is the AAA. But the AA is the minimum that you should aim for when you want to make accessibility applications. So we also support the EU standard in there, which has an own standard, and then the US standards section 508, which is defined by the US government. There is also a link here. Also, if you want to know more about accessibility, I linked here. Put here a link that gives you more information on that. So hTWOo is basically for SharePoint, Teams, and any web application. So we are completely independent because we just use HTML at the core level, right? So the way we built hTWOo, and we have 2 flavors there of the water, as you will. So we have the first hTWOo core is just really the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript implementation, which then will be taken one-on-one into React components. So if you not want to write HTML and CSS only, or use the components in an HTML, CSS only way, then you can still use the React components. But whenever we build something, we first build an hTWOo core in HTML, CSS only, and yeah. And also what you'll have in there in hTWOo, we also support the hTWOo icons, which are the Fluent UI icons, and there are 3,000 that you find also in hTWOo with a dedicated sample. If you want to know more, if you want to find the NPM packages, so then the simplest way to do it, go to PnPjs and search for hTWOo. Like I said, we currently have the version 2, and we wanted to get HTML and CSS right from the start correctly, so that we don't have breaking changes. And since version 1 and version 2, there are really no HTML and CSS breaking changes and no React breaking changes in there. So there's no complicated upgrade path. You simply use your older application that was built with version 1.0. You just simply can use it. The only thing that we did, we rewrote the complete library internal, the CSS that is built out completely in Sass Start, which is also supported nowadays in Sass 1.16 and onwards. And we also have in there, if you upgraded your solution not yet to 1.16.1, then you still can use all the CSS in there. So there's no breaking changes in this regards as well. Let me show you a little bit, go out of this documentation. So we have our completely new revamped website. Like I said, you have the hTWOo icons in here, which are the Fluent UI icons. So you can search, for example, for a truck, and then select this one, and then you can download it. So there are 2 styles in here, regular and filled, and can download those files, this SVGs as one file, and then use it in your applications. What else do we have? So we have here the documentation in here, atoms, molecules, organisms, template, and pages. So if you go search for bigger components, then you go to pages, and then they gradually go down. So what I see here is for example, for the Microsoft Teams client, is a splash screen with 3 splash screens across. And you also have the description in here. When I go in here, then I see this is one component that is built out. What is this component built out? So I can say, okay, what is the footer built out? And I can then see here, okay, we have a primary and a standard button in there, and how it is built out. So you can really dig into and we directly code in the system. So we don't need to spend any time, extra effort in documentation, So we build it right in there. This is how we build out all the components. So there are some components. So what you also see in here, for example, this button is now the standard SharePoint teal. and you have a switcher in here. So you see, for example, this is how it looks on the regular standard Teams client. This is how it looks in high contrast mode, and this is how the button then looks on the dark theme in Microsoft Teams. Another thing that we have in here, or invested a little bit, that maybe you're not aware of, there are so many things that currently work in HTML already. So what we have in here is a validation for the input fields. So over here, I specified a pattern which says A to C, small lowercase letters, and I want to have 4 to 8 letters in there with a pattern directly in there. That's native HTML. And then when I type in 1, 2, 3, 4, it gives me the red border in here and says this is incorrect. So this field is invalid. Of course, you can also request this with JavaScript. But then when I write in here A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I have 6 characters now in there, and now it's a valid field. So a lot of things in there where we invested. So we have all the input fields like email, password, phone, input with prefixed with URL, prefixed with fields like that. And yeah, if you have time, then look around and what you find in there. So the question is now, how do I get this into my SharePoint framework project, right? And let me switch over to the code. The first thing that you need to do is we have the on-init. This is documented. So you get the theme provider back from Microsoft. So you have all the semantic slots in there, the effects in there, and then you create out of that CSS variables. So there's one simple. So what we basically do is we add, where is it? We add custom properties to the DOM element of the web part. And then we have all the colors that are coming from the theme, from SharePoint into a CSS native way, and have all the color slots in there, which then will be used for from hTWOo directly. We had some problems with the semantic slots because sometimes the semantic slots doesn't match exactly what the name of the semantic slot is. So we choose in version 1 already that we switch over to palettes. The other thing what you have in the effects is you have in there the roundness of the buttons, as you see here on the right side. This is also something that is directly defined by SharePoint out of the box. So the major breaking change, what I told you before, is SASS start. So you see when you create a new web part project, you have the add import in here, and it imports the style sheet from somewhere from the node modules folder, from the add Microsoft folder. This is currently in SASS marked as deprecated and shouldn't use this anymore. Instead, what you should do is, the first thing is, the use statement can be compared to the import statement in JavaScript or in C#. So it imports a library, which is the meta utilities from SASS, as you will. And then we have here the web part, which is the surrounding class, which is prefixed or postfixed with a random string, so that we don't have bleed somewhere else outside of SharePoint. But since we have all CSS classes in there, which doesn't support this scoping that Microsoft does in the SPFx web part, we do a small trick here. So whatever we import here will be automatically prefixed with the hTWOo showcase class. And what we also have in here, the global styles. So it means, the pseudo class means, don't touch my CSS that we have in there. Okay. So now we have imported all the styles in there, and you see this button as it looks right now. One thing that you can do here is, or what I did here is simply, I went over to hTWOo, go to the buttons, button, and then search for, what is it, primary, go to buttons directly, it works, buttons, and then here's the primary button. Then you can switch over here to HTML, and you can take this one out and directly copy it into your render method in the inner HTML. So this is how this button was created. And as you see, it automatically, all the CSS will be applied automatically. So this is not really a smart way to do it. I show you another way what I did also in here. So I have the components in here. Another way is I create a new component, which is a static component. It has a function in here, primary. I pass in a label, or when there is no label defined, then return me back the button label, as you will. And what I can do now directly in the HTML is I can go in here, paste this into the template literal, call the function, pass in, this is a primary button with a break afterwards, save the file. And if the demo gods are with me, then you should see immediately the right side refreshing as far as when it has built. So this is a primary button. This is one thing that I can use. Another thing that you can do with use in the button, and this is a little bit more complex written. So this public static standard button creates a standard button. It has you can pass in a label as with the button above. You can pass in a callback function, which then will be called automatically. So what I do in here, then it returns the HTML button. So I create the button in here with document.create. Then I add the hTWOo button class to it, which is the class of the standard button, set in HTML what I want to have in there with the span as a template literal, and then register. If there is a callback, register automatically the button and then return it. Of course, in my code here, I need to do a little bit different. I need to now say this DOM element, first element, child, prepend hTWOo button standard with event. And then I pass in this click function, which does nothing else than just sends out an alert. Save the file, and we should then see in a couple of seconds the button appear on the right side when the build is done.
Hey, Stefan, can you zoom your code in a little bit?
Sure. Better? So now I have the button. I can also zoom in here. Let's click the button and it says hello world. That's how you can do it. But you can also do more complex stuff, and this is probably what. So the PnP reusable components has already an accordion. In hTWOo itself, we also created in this version an accordion which completely doesn't use any JavaScript. So these are just standard elements in HTML. So this is how it works in hTWOo. We have the HTML over here. So this is built out of molecule accordion item. We have here details, which is a standard HTML tag. And then we have a summary in there, which is the header. And this gives you this fancy accordion out of the box with no extra JavaScript involved. The only thing that we did in here in the accordion summary, we set an icon there and have some CSS that rotates this automatically once it is open. So we can do this, also bring this over to our SPFx solution pretty easily. So what I did here is, again, I created an accordion item. So what I do in here is just, it returns a template literal. It's just these details with the classes. Then I have the summary. I have the icon directly embedded as an SVG. I have my header again that I pass in, and I can pass in an HTML content in here. Or otherwise, it returns the lorem ipsum. What I can do now in the web part code itself, I can create a function which says get accordion, and then I do the same thing what I did already with the button. So I have the hTWOo accordion item, say I want to create a new item with this title and this with this context in there. The same thing, I want to create a new accordion item, and so on and so forth. No JavaScript involved. Just recognize that I missed here a section. Close it down. And what I can do now with this function with the get accordion, I simply add it to my code in here directly in the HTML. And then after the compilation, you see under direct, when it's compiled, hopefully. Not that time. Was this oh yeah, this was the section was too much maybe. Works. So you have here an accordion, a nice one, which has the text that are pushed in here. hTWOo is built on HTML and CSS first, documentation. I have here the lorem ipsum, which are the default ones when I don't compile anything in. And again, what you saw in hTWOo with hTWOo core is also available as hTWOo React components. So if you want to know more about it, there is also a link in here, a QR code. So npm install at nad/hTWOo core, or when you want to use the hTWOo React component, npm install at nad/hTWOo React, and follow us on Twitter. Are there some questions?
There was a question about browser support, which I think is a good one to answer.
Yeah, browser support, the first Chromium Edge browser, no Internet Explorer. And most likely, I mean, for the accordion stuff, this is it's already 5, 6, 7 years old browser, will still be supported by the summary and details.
So all modern browsers then, essentially, right?
Yeah, exactly. Modern browsers, a couple of generations back. So I think CSS Variables is now out for 5 years, 6 years or something like that. So if you have older browsers, then I would upgrade those.
Perfect. And of course, you can use hTWOo outside of SharePoint Framework, right? It's not dependent on SharePoint Framework.
It's absolutely not dependent on SharePoint Framework. The only thing that you need to do is we have standard objects, which gives you the root class, or what I use in hTWOo in the HTML documentation. There is no SPFx involved, whatever. I just have a simple file which contains all the theming slots that are defined in the Fluent UI fabric palette. And you pass this into your website, set the CSS variables, and then it automatically passes through all the components.
Yeah, I think it's great. Personal opinion. I've used this for a sample app that we have in the Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy repo as well. So we just use that as the UI framework for just a basic HTML JavaScript website, and it's great. It's nice and lightweight as well. It does the job. It looks nice as well. It looks beautiful.
Speaking of lightweight, the gzipped version of the complete CSS that we have in there is 15K, and the unzipped version has 68K or something like that, which is everything in there.
Tiny, minuscule. You won't even notice it. It's that small.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Stefan. Thanks for telling us about hTWOo. I know it's version 2. It's been out for a little while, gone through some iterations, but I think what you've shown today just shows what a great UI framework that you and the team have been able to put together. I love it, and I'm sure other people love it as well.
Yeah, and also kudos to Julie Turner, who does the React implementation of hTWOo core.
Kudos to Julie. So it's a great team. So well done to everyone. So I think that kind of really concludes today's call. So I just want to thank Kasper, Harminder, and Stefan for the demos today and sharing their thoughts and knowledge with us. So thank you for attending. Thank you for being a part of this session and engaging in the chat with all of your questions as well. The recording of this call will be available in 24 hours on the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community YouTube channel, as are all the other previous week's recordings and demos as well. So if you want to check out the recordings and subscribe so that you get a notification for when this call is uploaded, go to aka.ms/community/videos. keep engaging with us after this call. Give us a follow at Microsoft 365 Dev and at M365PNP on Twitter. The next Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework call is going to be May the 4th, and the next Microsoft 365 and Power Platform call is next Tuesday, April the 27th. And if you want to find all the details of how to join those calls, put those calls in your calendar, as well as all the other calls that we have available, go to aka.ms/community/calls, and you will find all of the details there. So lastly, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and we will see you next time.